Good evening. Thank you so much for joining us. I am Paula Fontana, Vice President of Strategic Programming Initiatives at the National Black MBA Association, and it is my pleasure to welcome you to Executive Presence and Digital First Impressions. Exposure to rich content such as this is one of the many benefits of membership with access to programming year-round with the National Black MBA Association. Tonight's presenter is Crystal L. Bailey, who puts the pro in protocol as director of the Etiquette Institute of Washington. Recognized for her fresh approach, Crystal is called upon for her expertise by global 500 companies and international media outlets, including BBC, CNN, and French television. Crystal, thank you so much for joining us, and you now have the virtual floor.
Thank you so much, Paula, and good evening, everyone. Now, what if I were to tell you that you have called an Uber, and when that Uber driver shows up, this is what you see. So someone on their phone, maybe doing makeup, maybe eating something, but completely distracted. Are you getting in that car? Doubtful. You're probably closing that app and opening another to find another ride. And when I think about executive presence, when I think about leadership and gravitas, I think about who would I want driving me? Who would I want at the wheel? Who would I want in charge? And so this evening, we are going to talk all about executive presence. There are a number of elements that go into it, and that includes our body language and facial expressions, our gravitas and character, vocal brand and our communication styles, as well as our grooming and attire. We'll talk about the environment that we find ourselves in. So whether in our office space or in our personal space, where we might be right now, our professional brand, our network, and how we utilize and uplift that network. And then we will close out talking about digital first impressions, because nowadays, certainly more than ever, our first impression is made digitally. And so I want us to make sure that we encompass that within our talk on executive presence. So let's focus in on gravitas. It's a word that we might hear. It's hard to define and to describe, but I want us to take a better look at it. And again, it really is having both hands on the wheel. It's building trust and credibility in the people that are around you by showing that you are a decisive person, that you are someone that we can look to make a swift but thoughtful decision. Your reputation and standing, your character, all of those things go into it. Your integrity. What do you do when no one else is watching? So gravitas is what I look for in an individual that has executive presence. And a lot of times we won't say, hey, that person has gravitas. We just feel it in their presence and in the way that they interact with us. We certainly can't talk about executive presence without thinking about making a stellar first impression. And so, traditionally, I would always say you need the basics, eye contact, a smile, and a firm handshake. But the firm handshake is a little bit out of the door. Now, of course, I don't want you thinking about greeting people in this way unless you're, kid or play. But there are ways that we can make a great first impression and still greet people and still be impactful in that 3 to 5 seconds when we're meeting an individual. And so, of course, eye contact and a smile are still in. You still need that same enthusiasm. You might say, why the smile if you even have on a mask, right? But you can see those little crinkles in the corners of someone's eyes. All of those things even resonate beyond a mask. And so when making a great first impression, I think about either instead of shaking hands now, bringing my hand to my chest or bringing my hands in front of me. And that's really so that an individual knows that I don't plan on shaking hands with them and they can get an idea of where my hands are. We never want our hands in our pockets or behind us when we're meeting someone, because again, our hands go to our trust factor, our ability to be trusted. Making sure that we slow down and take our time when we're meeting someone. If you've ever had the issue of someone mispronouncing your name, take a moment. Hi, I'm Crystal Bailey. So I'm taking a slight pause in between really slowing down. It's incumbent upon us to make sure that someone gets our name. And if you need to give them, well, it sounds just like or rhymes with, that's helpful, right? That helps someone to hold on to our name. Dale Carnegie said, a person's name to them is the sweetest and most important sound. So when I first meet someone, I'm repeating their name back, making sure that I've understood it, and maybe using it a few times in conversation as well. Now, we'll talk a little bit about body language. I want us to use and choose powerful body language and positions. And so here, I'm going to start off showing body language that we don't want to use, right? Anything that's going to make us smaller. For me growing up, I'm from Richmond, Virginia, and my mom, she would send me off to etiquette classes at the local department store. And they always told us to be very proper and demure and keep your hands in your lap. And that is great if you are sipping tea on a porch in the South, but not so great when you're trying to run a business, not so great when you're leading a team. And so I have to think of powerful body language. So the things we want to avoid include anything where we're constantly adjusting our hair or our clothing or touching our face. All of those things resonate very quickly to someone and say, that person is not confident. That person is not sure of themselves. So biting the nails, all of those things will throw out of the window. We see the young woman in the middle. Of course, she's making herself smaller, thinking of lifting the chest and rolling the shoulders back, right? Just those basic things without having said anything at all give us an impression. And so we really want to think about our body language. I showed the gentleman down in the bottom corner simply because one of his hands is hidden under the table. When I'm leading a meeting, when I'm in a boardroom, my hands are above the table. It shows interest and engagement. It's a power position to have your hands visible, and again, goes to your trust factor. So some more powerful body language, certainly the images that we see here. Now, I wouldn't necessarily go kicking my heels up on a table or a desk, unless it's my desk, right? But we have to be very thoughtful about that. However, you might watch a television show and see a president or a leader, right, kick their heels up on their desk. And it's a power position, it's a power move as well. And so you can think about the idea of just owning space, making yourself a little bit larger. And I know a lot of times, as I shared, for women, we have been told to make ourselves smaller. So in particular, I have to think about making myself bigger, taking up a little bit more space than I naturally would, or than what has been ingrained in me. I also want to make sure that my hand gestures marry with what I have to say. For example, if I told you, I have the biggest deal to offer, right? That's a little bit confusing. But if I say I have the biggest deal, it all makes sense to you. So it's always interesting to watch politicians and to see their hand gestures and what they're doing. And you get a lot of the thumb and hand, weird little things, because of course we don't want to point. But we can really utilize our body language and our hand gestures to carry forward the conversation. And I think now more than ever, when we're not able to maybe have our face visible at times, our hand gestures become really important. And so if you feel like you're a person that maybe uses too many hand gestures or not enough, find that happy middle ground, but also make sure that it's carrying your story forward, that it's actually helping and not hindering, because a lot of times people will focus more on your body language than even what you have to say. And if that's the case, if those messages are going against one another, then it will be difficult for someone to actually believe you or find you credible. Now, I'm going to geek out just a little bit, and I want to talk about our movement and our effort patterns, because this really goes into the way that we are perceived. And so I will use, for an example this evening, First Lady Michelle Obama as a study on movement, in a sense. I'll talk about what are Laban effort patterns. I won't go too in depth with it, but I want us to at least start thinking about how our movement impacts others and the impression that it gives. And so I'm going to share this chart with you. Don't let it overwhelm you. You can certainly look more into this if you become interested after the fact. But when thinking about Michelle Obama maybe moving across the stage, maybe heading to a podium, to a microphone to speak, I've been thinking about kind of that moment for her movement. And she's very direct, very focused in a sense, right? There's nothing wrong with indirect movement. It's not that you were kind of all over the place. It's more so a broader perspective. But I think of her movement as direct and very purposeful. When it comes down to time, her movement, with regards to time, I find it to be sustained. And so there are some people, you'll notice a lot of younger people that are, or individuals that are nervous, right? They move very quickly. And those that are more comfortable with themselves or the situation tend to move in a more sustained fashion. It also has to do with how do we see time, right? If I told you you had 30 minutes to accomplish something, are you going to be the person that, does it very quickly? Or the person that says, oh, I know what exactly how I can kind of plan out my 30 minutes. And so then I'm moving in a sustained fashion to complete it. So time is not just the basic concept of time, but maybe how we treat it as well. So I'm going to go with sustained for First Lady Obama. And then now I'm going to think about weight. And this is not our actual weight on a scale, but how do you move in a lighter, more effortless fashion, or in a heavier, more bogged down, almost clumsier fashion? And so I perceive her as having lighter movements. I haven't really seen her. She's, had her Let's Move campaign. She always seems like a very smooth, effortless mover to me. And so I'm thinking about light movement. And I also want to think about her flow. Some people are very bound and restricted in their movement, or there are others that are a little bit freer. And it's not that one is necessarily incorrect. It's just that we all fall in a different range. And it's something that we can adjust. So we can think about, the directness of our movement. Are we more sustained? Are we slowing down and taking our time? Because again, going back to that driver, who do you want at the wheel, right? You wouldn't want somebody that falls on the scale as maybe a flicker, right? As a driver, because they are going to be indirect and quick and heavy and free. And that just seems all over the place to me. But to go back to Michelle Obama, if we say that she's free, I can put her in this category of gliding. And so I think floating and gliding, even pressing, they're all good places to be. And I bring this up not to, again, overwhelm you with thoughts, but to really think, how am I moving through time and space? And what does that say about my credibility? What does it say about my presence? And that's kind of what one of the bigger elements to me of executive presence is our movement and our body language. Again, you can certainly find out more about Laban effort patterns just by an easy Google search, but he was a 1960s movement theorist. All right, I'll now talk a little bit about our vocal habits. So a lot of millennials and Generation Z get dinged for some of these vocal habits. And we have to remember that in a workplace, in a professional environment, we have a range of generations, so a range of expectations as well, and a range of people who perceive professionalism differently. And because of that, things we might want to avoid because they can even be just grating to the ear, nasal tones. So, always kind of talking a little bit like Fran Drescher, right, from The Nanny, or upspeak, where everything sounds like a question. So you're going into surgery and the doctor is like, I think we need, 20 cc's of propofol. That might be a lot, I don't know. But also, I'm also concerned that this person used upspeak in that sentence, right? That my surgeon or my anesthesiologist used upspeak, because it says that's a question and not a statement. And so I've worked with an individual who not only had upspeak, but also vocal fry as a habit. And vocal fry is really kind of falling into your voice like this. If you've ever listened to the podcast Serial, the host of that, Sarah Koenig, she has been known for her vocal fry, and it almost has become a generational trend to use it. If you listen maybe to the Kardashians or some other people that are in media, you may hear that vocal fry too. But it's simply running out of breath. And if you take a deep breath, you will get out of that. You won't be stuck in that land of vocal fry, and you won't be kind of grating to someone's ear. Again, those things to me take away your credibility. So avoiding the upspeak and vocal fry, and certainly in combination. Also, kindergarten teacher speak. If you've been working at home, though, you may be a kindergarten teacher for a moment and a professional at the same time, but you never really want to talk down to anyone. You get it, you guys? Okay, good, good, good. So we might have experienced individuals in our workspace that have some of these vocal habits, and we don't necessarily want to be around them as much. So avoiding some of those things, childlike voice, which is just a very high-pitched kind of voice. So thinking about maybe bringing down the tone of your voice as well, also that it's a little more pleasing so that people actually want to listen to you and are not focused on that as opposed to what you actually have to say. So our vocal, I mean, think about the Allstate man, right? You want to be in good hands. You want a voice that is reassuring to you. So we have to think about our voice and how it plays into our executive presence. So I always get the question of, how can I develop more eloquent speech? And so I've come up with an idea or a few ideas on things that we can do, certainly expanding our vocabulary through reading. If you've studied Latin, you're probably in very good shape, but if you have an idea of some of those roots, it helps you with so many languages. And just in our vernacular, right? We use so many French terms, we use so many, Spanish terms. And so it is helpful to have an idea of some of the roots so that even when you hear a word and it may be a foreign word to you, you still might have an idea of what the conversation means or where the conversation is going. Making sure that you modulate your voice. I heard of someone that was a telemarketer and he called a woman, and because his voice was so monotone, she kept saying to him, "Well, you're a robot." And he said, "No, ma'am, I'm not a robot." And she said, "They told you to say that," which I thought was hilarious. But we want to make sure that we're modulating our voice and so that we don't come off monotone or as a robot. Pacing ourselves as well. The human ear and mind can listen very quickly. So it's not that we have to speak slowly, but our pacing informs the listener of how important maybe some of those words are or how important a part of a message is. And so if I had something really important to say, I'd slow down just a little bit. So we're always thinking about our pacing, making sure that we're enunciating and finishing our words. And then I already mentioned it, but making sure that our gestures marry up with also what we have to say. And another point that I like to highlight is just that accents are beautiful. My background is in acting, and we were always kind of taught to find a middle kind of neutral accent. So no matter where we came from in the country, right, find that neutral accent so that you can build on it and do a British accent, do whatever you might need to add on to your own neutral accent. But I think in reality, right, I love hearing accents, whether it's a Southern accent, whether it's an accent from another country. And I know there are even services and companies that you can go to remove a foreign accent. But to me, again, I think they're beautiful. It's just all about slowing down and enunciating to make sure that your message is heard. Of course, avoiding cursing. There are times when that might be the only way that you can express your message, and I understand that, but these should be very limited times. And if you've ever been in a work environment with a swear jar, it's probably a good thing to have if you have a bad habit of that. But again, that goes to whether I listen to someone, whether I want to be around someone, whether I think that they have a vocabulary, right? Because a lot of times we just use expletives because we don't have an actual word or can't quite get to the word that we're looking for. Making sure that you focus in on your listeners, dropping a lot of the fillers, the uhs and the ums. I know it's really difficult for me. When I get rid of my ums, something else manifests itself, but always at least having an understanding of maybe some of the filler words that we use, even so or like, just the ways that we are starting off sentences, we should be aware of that because it goes to the eloquence of our speech. I also want you to keep in mind that it's important to have powerful, precise, and positive language. So powerful, I think about instead of yeah, sure, or even just a nonverbal yeah, right? Yes, certainly, absolutely. If I'm talking about, the things over there, I wouldn't just say that. I'm going to say the 12 bottles over there, the 12 items over there, maybe the dozen. I want to be as precise as possible with my language so that my message is clear. There's no misunderstanding. And then positive, just thinking about when you are interacting with people, is it someone that is just going to have something negative to say always, right? First thing in the morning, it's something negative. Last thing in the day, it's something negative. Or is it someone that you're engaging with that looks at the brighter side, that you want to be around because they do have more uplifting or more positive things to say? So also thinking about bringing positivity into our language. And so I have a few examples for us to think through. For more powerful language, you should consider investing in XYZ fund. Okay, maybe, possibly. I might have a few thousand to put in, but I would advise you to invest in XYZ fund. Oh, okay. Now I'm digging a little bit deeper in my pockets, right? Advise. It just is stronger, more powerful language. Maybe it would be better if, maybe. You're the expert here, right? So the maybes and the ifs and the kind ofs and the sort ofs don't work too well, in an executive environment. I propose we as opposed to maybe or sort of. It's no big deal. Well, maybe it is a big deal. Maybe the team that's all sitting behind or beside you is thinking, well, we just, put in 20 hours over the weekend. It's no big deal, right? So simply a thank you sometimes. It's hard for many of us to even take a compliment. But more than that, oh, thank you. Or, certainly we had to work very hard. We put in 20 hours over the weekend, but we were able to get the project done, right? So not throwing away your accomplishments or minimizing the things that you have done, or even minimizing the nicety of receiving a compliment from someone. Now I will move into thinking a little bit about our professionalism, our personal brand as well. So one thing I love about traveling is that very often I can go somewhere and I know I can find exactly what I want. For example, if I go pretty much anywhere in the US, I know I can find a Panera Bread. I don't know why that's like my thing, but it's very calming and relaxing to me to know that I can go somewhere and find a Panera Bread before maybe a speaking engagement or something like that. And I know exactly what I'm going to order. It's already in the app on my phone. But that's kind of branding, as well as a McDonald's, right? That's the whole point of these franchises, is that we know that I can go anywhere in the world. I can go to Tokyo and I can go to a McDonald's and the menu is going to be very similar, right? It's a brand. And so you too need to be that brand, that someone knows exactly what to expect from you and they look to you for it, right? They are coming to you because they have this great or grand or high expectation, and it is consistent, right? That's the important part, that it is consistent and that you are consistent with your brand, the way that you present yourself, and your work ethic as well. That's really important, right? I know that I can depend on you to, respond within 24 hours or immediately respond to an email. Either way, just needs to be a bit of consistency. Also, in our professional environment, we want to think about this line or this merger between personal and professional. For me, I'm a very private person. So when I was in a workplace with a lot of people, it was hard for me to kind of share my personal life with them. But I realized it was important to give a little bit, to give something. Some people gave too much, right? I knew too much about their wives and families and kids and all this. I didn't need to know that, right? But it's nice to know a little bit about someone's, family background or where they're from, or to see maybe a picture on someone's desk of their family, right? So it is giving a little bit of that personal, but not too much, and finding a good balance. And I'll talk a little bit more later about kind of an experience that I had that was important to me in finding this balance. But for the moment, I'd like for us to talk a little bit about meetings. So of course, in US business culture, very important for us to do a number of things when it comes to running meetings, leading meetings, or just participating, making sure that we RSVP, that we have a room that's suitable in size for everyone and the participants that you're going to have. And treating an RSVP, not just for a meeting, but any type of professional engagement, networking event, et cetera, like old school, dropping it in the mail, that you kind of can't take it out of the mailbox. You have to go with what you said on your RSVP. Nowadays, because we can click yes and no and a weird maybe, a lot of times we go back on our word, but making sure that your RSVP actually means something when you say you're going to be there. Not skipping out on meetings. A lot of times we're like, oh my goodness, I have so much to do. That it'd be more effective for me to stay at my desk and kind of work through, as opposed to going to this meeting, the meeting that could have been an email, right? But sure, it probably could have been an email, but this is a time, one, for a little bit of socializing in the professional realm, but also it's the time to be seen, for people to know you're there and visible. If you're stuck, in the corner of an office, for weeks at a time, people don't know that you're there. And so it's important to show up and to be visible. When you step into a meeting space, if you have guests or visitors or clients, making sure that you stand or greet them as opposed to just going and sitting down. And one thing I've experienced a lot is going into a boardroom that maybe has chairs around the periphery of the room, that there are individuals that they automatically know, oh, well, that's my seat over there in the far back corner against the wall. And there might be plenty of seats at the table, but they will still automatically take their seat and resign themselves to the outskirts of the room. And we never want to do that. And certainly not to have that as our default. So taking a seat at the table is important. Of course, turning off our electronics. So that's also trying not to take meeting notes on a laptop when we're in person with people, because that can be terribly distracting. It says to whoever is speaking that whatever is on your computer is more important than them, the same way that a phone would. And I know some people, take notes that way, but I think it's better to put it up in a meeting when possible. Making sure that we secure seating for all, that's important. It might be okay for a 15-minute meeting for everyone to kind of stand around, but not so great for a 60-minute meeting. And so people are kind of tuned out if they're uncomfortable as well. Avoiding eating and drinking or having, big items or food. And I also want to add this in for Zoom in case I don't mention it later, but avoiding when we can, eating on a Zoom call when we have our cameras on. So that's important. No one necessarily wants to see that. And I think on a Zoom, it's even more zoomed in, right? And so we're getting a little too much detail. And then also making sure that we arrive on time, but we stay to the end of meetings. So all of those things will go in there. Speaking of time, it's important to respect your time and to make sure that others respect it as well. And so arriving not too early, right, but on time, because if you're arriving 20 minutes in advance, it lets me know you don't have that much going on potentially. And it's just a thing about US business culture, right, that we have this feeling of constantly being on, constantly doing something, but that is kind of our culture in a sense. And it might be a culture in the work environment that you're in to constantly be on. And so it is a little unusual to linger for 20 minutes before or after a meeting. So not arriving too early, calling and emailing if you're going to be late, and then setting time limits for yourself. I have found, especially during this time of COVID, the importance of setting time limits for meetings, right? I'm not going to just say, oh, something is at 7. I'm going to say it's from 7 to 7:15, 7 to 7:30. I'm going to be very clear about that because we all have experienced Zoom fatigue, right? We've all experienced just the fatigue of this unusual environment. And so I think it's important to kind of put those limits and establish times. Even if you're adding to your emails, you're available this time or the other, it allows others to respect your time. And the last point that I'll add on with time is if you've ever had the issue, back when you're in your office or cubicle space, whatever it is, of someone lingering, right? A lot of times I would have a good work friend, right? And we could talk for hours, literally hours if you let us. And it was important for me to not give the appearance that I was, chatting for hours. And so I would have to dissuade and say, hey, would you like to go for a walk during our break? Or would you like to grab lunch together? Or I'll be over to chat later with you, or something like that. All of those things are helpful in dissuading maybe that person that lingers at your desk and it's a little uncomfortable. You can also kind of do the typing and focused thing too, and they'll get the message. Other mistakes and things to avoid in the workspace. So being the office mom. Now we all know the Girl Scout cookie lady. And if anybody on here is Girl Scout cookie lady, let me know. You can just drop that in the chat. I don't know if it's that season yet. However, you don't want to be known in an office necessarily for that, right? You might want to be known for the professional skills that you have. And so keeping that in mind, are you known for bringing brownies on Friday or having the cookie, the candy jar at your desk? What do you want to be known for in your professional environment? As well as turning your office space or cubicle space into home goods, right? Overly decorating. And I say that, but now we're actually at home. And so I guess you can have a little bit of home goods decor. That'd be perfectly fine. Oversharing personal business. There are times when I know I cannot have a phone call with my mother at my desk. I just know that I cannot. there are times when I know I need to go out probably to the car and have that conversation. And so thinking about, am I oversharing too much in my professional environment? Being the girl Friday or going outside of your job role. So if you're constantly being asked, oh, Crystal, would you mind planning such and such going away party or doing this or planning the holiday? No, no. But maybe, Roger didn't get an opportunity to do that last year. Maybe this is his year to do that. So taking it off of yourself, not becoming known as the office party planner if that is not your goal or your interest as well. And then the big thing that I want to emphasize is skipping coffee. So I normally make my coffee just with a little French press at my desk. And so I worked in this office once, and every day there would be like a gaggle of people that would go by and they would head off to Starbucks. Crystal, do you want to go to Starbucks? Oh, I'm good, thank you. Right. Crystal, do you want to go? No, oh, but thank you. And so eventually I kept saying no, and they stopped asking. But I realized there was so much more going on at these little coffees at the Starbucks, and I was missing out on things, on opportunities. I didn't know about them. And had I taken the initiative to just take a walk, right, and see what was going on. The same thing, a lot of people will just skip happy hours or other things like that in a work environment, but that's when you get to have these conversations. That's when you get to bring a little bit of your personal to the professional, and people realize, hey, you're a great person to be around. The next time we have an opportunity, a travel opportunity, whatever it is, oh yeah, bring Crystal along, right? Because I've given them a little something of myself. They have an idea of my personality, and so they want to engage. And so we really have to think about not skipping the coffee or the happy hours all the time. It's not that I'm going to go out and have 4 martinis or 20 shots with everyone, but I might want to be there to be witness to that. Interesting. A few more things to think about. Disorganized workspace, overly cluttered, hoarded out. I've seen the hoarded out, very disturbing. Not entering without permission. So whether it's a cubicle, whether it's an office, making sure that that person is comfortable with you stepping in. Is now a good time? Do you have a moment? Any of those things is perfect before just barging into a personal space, even in a work environment. If you see that someone is on a call, not trying to, sign language or, in the air, give them notes on what you wanted to talk about, but stepping away and allowing them to have their phone call and then coming back. So not distracting them. Of course, eavesdropping and gossiping in the workplace. You don't want to be known as the gossiper. Playing music that is for everyone to hear, right? So just being very thoughtful about that, or using speakerphone, I think, is another kind of annoyance that might happen in an open workspace as well. A few more. I don't know if they're just my pet peeves, but I'm going to add them in. Poor hygiene or grooming at the desk. So clipping nails, any of those things say to me that you are not focused on the task at hand. So I'm always stepping away if there's any kind of personal grooming that I need to do. There was a woman, Cindy's, every day at 2 o'clock, Cindy would, I don't know, spray, I don't even know what it was some type of bath and body. And eventually I had to say, as much as I love it, it really is irritating my nose, or, I have allergies, something, right? But I shouldn't even have to do that. It's a work environment. We shouldn't be spraying scents, as well as bringing in overly odorous foods. So we have to remember, we spend so much time with our coworkers, right? That we have to be respectful of them. It really just makes for a smoother, better experience when we are away from home. I won't go in depth with dress codes, but I just want to mention and have us thinking about it a little bit, in the importance of recognizing different dress codes, no matter where you're invited, right? You can always think about the time of day. So sometimes we're not given a specific dress code. But if I know that it's 6 p.m. at the Embassy of Finland, right? Well, where's everyone coming from on Wednesday at 6 p.m.? From work, right? And so even though I might hear embassy and think, oh, well, I have this fabulous cocktail dress I want to wear, everyone is coming from work, business attire would be most appropriate. And so when we don't have an idea or specific instructions on a dress code, I'm usually going with business professional will get us by. I do want to talk about kind of the 4 elements that go into attire and the importance of them, which is structure, making sure that our clothing is tailored to us. And it doesn't mean having to go out to a tailor and spend more on the outfit, more on the tailoring than the clothing, but it's even the construction of the clothing that we buy, the thickness of the material, all of those things go into the structure. The color, this woman has on a color that really pops and works well for her. There are times when we want to have on a color that's dynamic. There are times when I worked, in a courtroom, and I did not want the focus to be on me when I'm representing someone else, right? I want the focus to be on, my client, or maybe anything else as well. And so maybe I wouldn't wear that pop of color that I would, or the colorful lipstick. Polish, so just making sure that everything is ironed and cleaned and has the buttons it's supposed to have. And it seems like little small things, but these details matter, that our shoes are shined, right? That the heel taps are on our heels. That attention to detail lets me know that professionally you also pay attention to detail. And then of course, fit is important. You don't want something looking too large, because that can make us look sloppy, or too small as well. So finding just the correct fit and structure and tailoring for our professional clothing. I say all that, you might be in your pajamas because we're working from home, and we will talk about the new business casual in a little bit. I want you to also pay, though, attention to the details. And so, not that you need to go out and buy a $300 Mont Blanc pen or something like that, but it does matter what you carry, right? Even if you were to present something to me, a piece of paper, right, out of a portfolio that was nice and polished or nice and clean, as opposed to, just a white envelope, right? I'd be like, oh, okay, well, this kind of seems a little more weighty, has a little more to it. So those small little things actually matter. I just advise us to all pay attention to the small details. So we've talked about a lot when it comes to executive presence. We've kind of gone around this circle. I want us to speak just a little bit on our network, and we'll move into that now, because our network and the people that we have around us and the people that we uplift are important. That goes into our executive presence. So a big thing is being a connector. When you have two people that have an interest, whether it be at a networking event or just the fact that you know two people that should know one another, right? Being a connector puts you in a position of power. And so always thinking about how can I connect other people, whether it be for opportunities, common interests, or to advance their careers. And so one thing that you will find in an executive and in a leader is that they are a great connector, and they're always thinking about kind of how they can weave the individuals that they know together and be that connector. I don't know if you've ever had anyone to ask you this question, but I was at a networking event, and at the end of a conversation, a woman said to me, well, what can I do for you? And I was like, wow, I hope anyone ever asked me that. Are you prepared to answer that question? That's really important. Be the person who asks that question to others, right? A lot of times we'll go into networking thinking, what can I get out of it? I'm trick-or-treating for business cards or trying to make it rain business cards. That's never the goal. The idea is, can I connect people? Can I provide opportunities? Can I lift other people up, right? Because if I lift them up, they're going to bring me up as well. So what can I do for you? Be ready to answer that question, but also be the amazing person that asks that question and kind of throws someone off a little bit. I will talk just briefly about making proper introductions, because this is important, whether we're making in-person introductions or doing it virtually. And I see more often than not, virtual or email introductions kind of go all over the place. And it's because we really don't think about the importance of the etiquette that goes into it or the deference that is needed. And so in business, we're always thinking about rank. So sometimes socially, I might think about age or gender, and that's why I use the acronym RAG. But for business, we're only going to focus on rank. That's the most important. And so I'll give you just this quick example here. I am here in the middle. You are there in the middle. All right. And you have the senior vice president of marketing, and you also have a new associate. So the immediate question that I'm going to ask myself is, who should receive the most honor? Who should receive the most honor is the question that should come to your head. That's the name that you will say first, the person who should receive the most honor. So I have these two people, I have the SVP and I have the new associate. Well, pretty easy for me to answer that question. I'm going to say that Rose Masterson should receive the most honor. So in doing that introduction, I will say, Rose, may I introduce our newest associate, Lisa Price. She is joining us here from Sacramento, California. Lisa, please meet our Senior Vice President of Marketing, Rose Masterson. She's going to be a great person for you to know and connect with. So literally the name that you say first is Rose Masterson, the person who should receive the most honor. This is also important when you're making introductions by email as well, when you're addressing people. There are some companies or law firms, et cetera, where even in the to line, right, you have to go by the person who's the most senior, the person highest ranking, or who should receive the most honor. And so we have to have this understanding of deference and the importance of it in our professional interactions. I want us to think a little bit about our virtual networking, and just to keep in mind the importance of checking in with people during this time, making sure that you're showing up. So I know it can be draining to do actual video calls, but that is what's going to be kind of the strongest interaction with someone. I like to go through my calendar from last year, and I have just a handwritten calendar. And what was I doing last year, on November 11th? Was I speaking somewhere? Did I go to a particular event? And can I re-engage with those people? And so kind of take the moment. We're not in our regular environment. We're not doing the regular events we did, but can I still make these little touch points with the individuals that I was in touch with last year or even the year before? Okay, seeing what you can offer. So what can I do for you? And remembering that it's okay to go old school. Send a note. I think you probably get more bills than anything in the mail. So it's nice to get just a handwritten note from a colleague or someone that's thinking about you, even in a professional sense. It's okay to ask for connections, right? This is an unusual time. People are going through different things. It is okay to ask. And even if it were not, the situation of COVID, right? It's okay to ask for connections. A closed mouth does not get fed. Making sure that you make introductions of others, reaching back, like I said, to people that you haven't interacted with for a while, and then maybe thinking about creating little smaller professional groups that you have the opportunity now to connect with. And it could be people from all over the country or the world even that you may know that before you wouldn't have had that opportunity to. But using this time kind of to our advantage when we're in this virtual space to make sure that we're still networking. It doesn't mean that networking should be out of the door. Okay. I also want to remind us just to follow up after you've connected with someone or you've said you were going to do something, making sure that you do it when you meet someone at a networking event, following up within 24 hours. This is important. An executive is going to stay in the loop and make sure that you follow up. It's that consistency that goes into your professional brand. So I always like to take a moment and just think about the network, professional, personal, my educational network, and the organizations that I'm a part of. And so you have so many people available to you, making sure that you're utilizing them, that you're connecting, one corner with the other, that you're bringing people together. And again, that places you in a position of power there in the middle, being able to be strategic in that sense, and having a vision as well. So covering a lot. We just finished up with networking, and then now we're going to move in our last few minutes into digital first impressions. And so, as I said, more often than not, we are meeting people virtually. The moment I get a name from someone in an email, someone sends an email my way, I'm looking them up, right? I'll be honest about that. And so maybe I'll see their LinkedIn, but maybe Facebook comes up. Who knows? Or maybe their bio on a website. Or a news article. And so just being aware, what is your digital first impression? When you Google yourself, what do people see? And are there ways to manage it? So we'll talk about a few things, of course, phone and voicemail etiquette. So just making sure that you kind of go through your phone and you're checking your voicemail. When was the last time you updated your voicemail, right? Maybe now is a great time to do a refresher on that. Your LinkedIn profile, your social media, after you've Googled yourself and you see what's out there, right? I think now is a good time to do kind of a reset or a refresh on all those things. I will just hit a few points regarding making sure that you keep your voicemail inbox clean and clear. I always have to say that to young people because they're not big into voicemail, nor am I. I don't think most people are, but it's a fact of life, right? And I'm not going to hire someone if I feel like they can't even keep up with their personal voicemail, right? And now I'm asking them to deal with a professional voicemail to represent my company as well. So keeping our personal voicemails up and our professional voicemails, and not using that as a way to get people to email you. So if your voicemail is full, they have no choice to contact you. That's not a good way to manage your voicemail. Going through again, Googling yourself and checking your social media, seeing what's out there, but then also being a leader, right? And that means, posting. If you have articles to share, information to share, it's very easy on LinkedIn to, write a short little article or something that's, happening in the news or on point with what's in your industry. And that way you are building up kind of your bona fides. Smart technology, I won't linger here long, but I will just remind us that we always want to put people first. And so just being careful about it, even our phones, anything, if that's taking away from my interaction with someone in person, that's a no-no, something I want to avoid. The big thing that I want to hit on though is thinking about our Zoom interactions. And so confirming the format. I cannot tell you how much makeup I have wasted thinking that a meeting was a Zoom call and was just a phone call, or vice versa, right? And I wasn't prepared. So I like to always confirm in advance because not everyone uses Zoom. Sometimes, they're sending some other platform and I'm like, is that a call? I'm not quite certain. I will ask because I don't want to go through undue stress. Designating an end time, making sure that I'm lighting myself. I think everybody has those little ring lights, but it does make a difference, right? It's important for us to make sure that we are well lit and well represented when we are presenting ourselves, especially if it's a presentation or it's an external interaction, right? It might be one thing internal and you can be a little more relaxed, but when we are meeting externally with clients and things like that, we want to think about being our most professional. Checking your name. Maybe your kids were on Zoom last night and now you get on your Zoom account and your name is something else and you don't want it to be that. So checking that, making sure that your camera is level. And the weird thing about Zoom, right, is you actually have to look into the camera and you don't get to look at the people, and it's kind of the sad thing, but it is what it is. Especially when you're presenting, you want to think about creating eye contact. And so making sure that you're focusing in on the camera as opposed to looking off. The special effects, I would let them go, right? Rarely are they coming off great. They're always a little bit sketchy and weird unless you have an actual green screen behind you. So for me, I'm not a big fan of the special effects until they beef up the technology a little bit. And I always open up a Zoom, like a private Zoom, before I even get on it, just to check myself, make sure that everything is where I want it to be. I was on a Zoom with a guy once, he had like some kind of pills or something in the background. I'm like, what is that? I shouldn't be thinking about that. Check and see what's in the background of your Zoom. A few more things to keep in mind. There is the new business casual. It doesn't mean that you don't need pants on, right? You never know when you might have to jump up, the kids, something, anything going on, right? So you actually need to be fully clothed. Hopefully, so odd that I have to say that. Fight Zoom fatigue as best you can. And that means structuring your time, maybe choosing days that work best for you, that, on Thursdays, I know these are my days that I'm going to be on camera, and coordinating that also with your coworkers as well, or coordinating your meetings in that sense. It's helpful if you don't have to worry about things every single day of the week. Also thinking about, do I have a system to be able to keep up with everything? I realized that once we were at home a lot, I still was somehow missing like meetings and things like that. So getting a good system in place, whether it's a Google Calendar or something that's going to alert you to make sure that you stay on top of things. Because the oddest thing is, being at home, you may end up missing a lot of meetings just by being a little bit in an unusual place or days. So acknowledging also the awkward, we talked earlier about interacting with people and what do I do about handshakes? I do believe we will go back to handshakes, but it's okay to acknowledge the awkwardness of not being able to shake hands, or the awkwardness of being on a Zoom and a weird noise or something goes on. It's life, and take a deep breath and keep it moving. Now, I will also just have us closing out thinking about emailing like a boss. So things to keep in mind, because we probably spend most of our time emailing anyway. So knowing and understanding the difference between to and CC and BCC, right? And that we're rarely using BCC unless we're just sending something to a large group. But it's important to protect people's personal information in their emails. And then also no one wants to have to deal with those major reply alls. So knowing and understanding the difference. A CC is just when I need someone to be aware of it, but I don't need them to take action. Using very detailed subject lines. I even put brackets in my subject lines just to make sure that if I need a signature is needed or approval needed, I might actually use a bracket that draws attention to the person who's reading it. Not including too many quotes, or yeah, I don't even know if you need any quotes at the bottom of your email. I was emailing someone at a university once. She had 7 quotes at the bottom. I was like, ooh, very motivational, but too much. Always including your signature block so that people know how to get to you. And I do not understand for the life of me why in 2020 that people do not include a signature block. If I need to call you, if I need to reach you, it needs to be there. And so that I find that extremely frustrating. Including complimentary greetings and closings, and just making sure that we err on the side of formality. That when you haven't met someone and you don't know them, to go with the most formal and wait for them to say, oh, you can just call me Vicky instead of Victoria, right? But allowing that person to give the go ahead. Recognizing the difference between emailing internally and externally, and the way that we might treat those, 2 different audiences, important. Responding promptly and having a standard for that. I'm very OCD about keeping my email at 0, but please don't be like me. Putting the bottom line up front so that people don't have to read through an entire email, or using bullets, just so that, listen, we have to go through a lot of emails in a day. The least you could do is highlight what's important for someone that's reading. Making sure now that we look at the bottom of emails for preferred pronouns when we're addressing people. So another thing to keep in mind, or maybe to add onto your email signature block. Over apologizing as you email. And let's see, what else do I want to highlight? Oh, paying attention. I'll say this one: removing unnecessary images and logos, big for me, because a lot of times they will show up to others as attachments. That's so frustrating when I'm actually looking for an attachment and it's just logos. So if you don't need the extra stuff, if it's company standard, that's one thing. But if it's just something that you've kind of embedded in your email, if you can go without it, I'd go without it. Cleaner is better. So as far as our complimentary closings, things to keep, and then I've given a few to toss. I even have my email closing, which I usually typically use, is very truly yours at the bottom on the toss list. It's okay. It's like an old school lawyerly thing, but it's mine. It probably should be thrown out, but I like it. So sometimes you can break the rules. And finally, I want us to think about, our executive presence, even in our emails. And so making sure we're using that powerful, precise, and positive language. So instead of, I just wanted to check in, when can I expect an update? Oops, I totally missed that. We're always apologizing for something. Stop apologizing. Thanks for the catch. Great catch. I appreciate it, etc. But not, oh, I'm so sorry. What time works for you? Oh my goodness. Just hit me with the times. If you spent 30 minutes trying to draft an email, it might be better to say, let's chat, right? There are times when we just need a phone call, or we just need to walk over a few desks and actually talk to someone. Sorry for the delay. Another apology there. Thanks for your patience. I appreciate it. Okay. So I know we talked about a lot this evening. I want to be respectful of your time, but I know that we have a few questions and I would love to be able to answer them. I will ask Paula if she's available to assist with answering a few of our participants' questions.
Surely. So one good one, I know when you were talking about the whole Zoom fatigue, I actually suffer from that as well. One question that we had come in was about the Zoom meeting invites. If it includes a video link and a conference call, is it assumed that you have to use the video link, or can you use the conference number instead?
It's hard to know. It is really hard to know. And that is why I specifically asked. I will send another little email and I will ask. I'm also very aware that I will say, participants are expected to be on camera. If I'm like doing a training or something like that, and I need the participants on camera. So I think it's important for us to do that when we're sending out meeting invites, but also asking because you might know the culture within your team or something like that, and that nobody has their cameras on. But if it's an outside client, something like that, right? I want to be prepared to be camera ready. In a sense, great question.
Awesome. Thank you for answering. All right. The last question that I see in the chat: how do I go about asking for an address to send a small gift as a token of appreciation without coming across as creepy?
Right. Because normally, right, we could send something to someone's office or send a note to their office, and that was okay. Now, they likely would not get that. And so it is asking for their email. And I just wanted to send over a short note or something like that. So even to say that, I think is perfectly fine in a short email to get the actual address where they are at the moment and be able to send that to them. And so it is not creepy, but I would let them know that I'm, sending over a note or a card. And maybe if it's something more fabulous and exciting, they'll be surprised by that. But perfectly fine to ask for that, especially in these really unusual times.
Awesome. Well, that concludes all of the questions that have come in. This has
Yeah.
been a phenomenal presentation. Thank you so much for pouring into our members and helping us to become more executive in our presence. And for those of you who took the time to listen, thank you for joining. We would love to get your feedback on how you felt the presentation went as well. So in the chat box, you will see that there is a link to a survey. The first 25 people who answer the survey will have a chance to win an Amazon gift card. So be sure to be one of those first 25 so that you can enter in that chance to win. I hope you have a wonderful, safe rest of your evening, and we'll see you again real soon. Good night.